I think are we ready to go, team?
Yes, we are.
All right, everybody. My name is Johns Hopkins, and I'm with Baltimore Heritage, and want to say welcome to Bmore Historic 2020. Old friends, new friends, neighbors, colleagues, this is going to be a wild ride. So glad you're spending your morning and maybe early afternoon with us. Thanks and welcome again. Today, I'm going to say a few sort of housekeeping words, and my colleague Molly is going to say a few words to make sure we're all on the same page technology-wise. But before we get rolling, I have to say thank you to all of the organizing committee folks. It's a way overused phrase. Everybody says, oh, it's a team, oh, it's a collaboration, it's a partnership. That is actually the case in this with Bmore Historic. It is there is no captain of the ship. We are all rowing at the same time here. So let me just say thanks to the following folks. If you know them, send them a private chat or a text and say good job. Megan Bacco, Rachel Brandenburg, Jessica Selmer, Kate Drabinski, Kate Howard, Nicole King, Dean Krimmel, Mike Keithy, Alexis Ojeda Brown, Martha Osterbiel, Amanda Phillips DeLucas, Molly Ricks, Joanna Shine, Rob Schoberline, Allison Saylor, and Kaylin Thomas. Thank you everybody for making this possible. All right, let's see. Failure number one is the slide did not go down. Oh, well, we'll do it that way. All right, real quick, I'm gonna fire through these things so we can get to what we're really here for. The website is bmorehistoric.org. It's got all the information about this conference on it, including today's agenda. So if you get booted off because Verizon doesn't like you anymore, or you're homeschooling your kids and they're taking up all the bandwidth, and you want to know where we are in the day, go to bmorehistoric.org. All right. What hashtag? If you are a social media hound, there is the hashtag. I am not still sure exactly what this means, but if you know what it means, go for it. All right, number 4 or 5, what are we doing today? If this is the first time you're at Bmore Historic, welcome. If this is your 9th time, I think we're in our 9th year of this, and if this is your 9th time, still welcome. Today is going to be largely the same as when we were doing it in person, but obviously somewhat different because we're not doing it in person. But the major sort of principles remain, and let me just kind of go through those. We're here because we all love historic places in and around Baltimore, and we want to try to use those places to make our communities better. So I think the sort of common denominator is this sort of shared love for history and trying to use history to make our worlds a better place. And in that regard, today's conference, and we're going to have 3 conference sessions, an icebreaker session and 3 conference sessions, a lunchtime set of lightning talks, which I'll explain, and then sort of debrief and social meetup that we can try to do virtually. But through all of those, we have a couple principles. One, let me make sure I get all of these right. One is the freedom to move. If for whatever reason you want to log off of this, go for it. It's your time. That's not rude. In the unconference, at least, that's not rude. Please feel free to do that. 2 is participation. This conference is about participating and about listening. We firmly believe that all of us have something valuable to say, so please contribute, but also you can't learn if you don't listen, so please be considerate and listen as well. Number 3, we believe that everybody has something to share, whether you're an expert or not in whatever topic we're talking about. Please don't feel intimidated. We want to hear from you. Number 4 is, and this one's going to be a little tough, but one of the things we hope to accomplish with this unconference is getting to know people. So please take a moment and scroll through the participant list. If you see somebody who you haven't seen, see a name that of somebody you haven't seen for 2 or 3 years, send them a chat. Or how about this really novel idea? After we're done, call them on your phone. Actually use your phone as a phone and give them a call and meet back up. So please take this, use this as an opportunity to do that. All right, real quick, code of conduct. This conference is a harassment-free environment, regardless of age or sex or sexual orientation or sexual identity or religion. Please be considerate. I'm going to use the words of our own Thurgood Marshall. In recognizing the humanity of our fellow beings, we pay ourselves the highest tribute. So please be considerate. I know we don't really need to say that with all of you, but just to go over that one more time. All right, so today's schedule is, of course, on bmorehistoric.org. So the first thing is if you lose us, that's where you can go to find us, re-find us, I guess. Whoops. So the schedule itself is up on the screen now. And you'll see that we're gonna, after we're done with our little sort of introductory remarks, we're gonna have an icebreaker, and then we're gonna have three main sessions, each one, a 5-minute break between each one. Molly, my colleague Molly, is gonna put kind of the doomsday countdown clock on the screen between those. It'll count down from 5 minutes. So get up, stretch, do whatever you need to do. But leave us connected and then come back after 5 minutes. You'll see at the break between the third session and lunch is 10 minutes. So an whopping extra 5 minutes. That is probably not enough time for you to go and cook duck l'orange and uncork that bottle of chilled Chardonnay that you've been saving just for this very day. But it is enough time, hopefully, to go warm up your soup and bring it back and eat lunch while listening to our lightning talks, which I'll talk a second about here. And then finally, after the lightning round, we're going to go immediately into a wrap-up session and then a little bit of networking, virtual networking, to try to make new connections and rekindle old ones. All right. Oops. All right, sorry, lightning talks. Hopefully in your conference registration, a confirmation email, excuse me, you got a link to sign up for lightning talks. If you did, great, you have already participated. You've done sort of step 1 in unconferencing, and that is signing up for these. If you didn't, don't worry. Molly is gonna put the link for how to sign up in the chat box right now. And I think we'll try to give people, if you can sign up during the first session or the second session, that would be great. We might close it after the second session to give our lightning talk organizers time to do a little bit of organizing before lunch. So if you're not familiar with lightning talks, what are lightning talks? Well, they're a way over lunch again. So we encourage you to grab lunch and eat and listen at the same time. But they're a way for all of us to share what's going on. We had 144 registrants, people still signing in, as you can see. But I will humbly suggest that these are the most dynamic, creative, wonderful, engaged people in our history community. And if you've got something you'd like to share or a question you'd like to ask, this is the time to do it. In 2 minutes or less, they are lightning talks. From 12 to 12:30, that's the chance for you to do it. If you've got a virtual event coming up, or you want to share with us, or you've got you're a small museum and you're just now beginning to reopen, you want to share that. If you've got a project you're working on and you need some collaborators with you, that's a time to ask for help or for assistance. So please sign up. It is a great way. I will also suggest that in that half an hour, we can learn more about what's going on now in our history community than you can in a week over Facebook. So take advantage of it and sign up. And with that, I am going to turn it over to my colleague Molly. Well, actually questions. I'm sorry, questions. If you have any questions, in the interest of time, can I ask that you put them in the chat box? And then we're going to try to read through them and get to them after Molly's done talking about technology. So I'm going to switch over and ask Molly to come on in.
Hi, everyone. I'm Molly, and I am the Community Engagement and Communications Manager at Baltimore Heritage. And I'm delighted to be here. Last year, at this time last year at the Bmore Historic Unconference, I had just started this job, and I was very new, and the conference was a whirlwind. and it was amazing, and I had a lot of fun. And so 1 year later, we're back, and it's virtual. And so last year I was like arranging bagels, and this year we're virtual, and so I'm doing like Zoom stuff. So I just wanted to share with everyone things you probably already know, but just a refresher about this unconference that is now virtual. So one, the sessions are going to be recorded, and they're going to be on our YouTube page after the conference is over. So just, again, everyone, this is being recorded. Two, each session will be led by a facilitator, and these are folks who suggested topics over the last weeks and then volunteered to start the discussion on them. And the facilitator will start by sharing, and then it will open up to group discussion. And unlike when we can do this in person and we're in smaller groups, this year in the discussions, there will be no round robin introductions because all of us are all together, and we're big this year. So, but we do encourage sharing. So the way that we're gonna do that is please use the raise hand function in Zoom. And so on a computer, if you click participants, then you'll see on the bottom, there's a raise hand function. And if you are on the mobile app, you go to the bottom and you click where there's 3 little dots and it says more, and then you click raise hand there. And so today I am acting as our Zoom host, and I will actually, so if you raise your hand, I will let you know when it's your time to share. And we're gonna get through as many people as we can, and we're gonna go in the order in which people raise their hand. And so we're going to stay on time as best we can, even though we're already running a little behind. It might be a little messy. This is an experiment for us too, but we're excited about it. So for any technical issues during this event, please contact me, and there's my email, and I'll put this in the chat, or Mike Keithy, and I'll put his email as well. And so that's about it for me. I'm happy to be here, and I am now going to turn it over to Martha and Dean for the icebreaker. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Molly. Hi, everyone. My name is Martha Osterbiel. I work at the Maryland Center for History and Culture, and my partner Dean is here, and we're going to just talk you through an icebreaker to get us all moving this morning and engaged.
Hi, everybody. My name is Dean Krimmel. I do work with local museums and historic sites doing exhibitions, interpretive planning, strategy, strategic planning. I'm going to read the icebreaker and first say why we do it. Spirit of the conference is to connect, is to see meet people you've never met, see old friends. Figure out, get a better view of this world that we live in and that we all work in. So here are the 3 questions, and I'll read them, and then Martha will tell you a little bit about the logistics. The first is, please introduce yourself. And we're going to be in breakout room, by the way, I'll just say that. Please introduce yourself. And then the second one is, we thought, in the spirit of the hellish world we're living in, what's today's mood? If you feel like, however you're feeling, let the other folks know. And thirdly, what are you here for? What do you hope to get out of today's unconference? And it can be, as little or big as you like. So that's those are the 3 questions, and I will, Martha, you'll take us through how we'll do it.
Sure.
Everybody, have a good conference, everybody.
So we're about to move into breakout sessions. Molly is going to hit go, and we'll all be invited into a smaller room at random with 5 other people. We'll have about 7 minutes in this room to discuss the prompt that Dean just walked through, and then we'll close the rooms and we'll come back together as a group. Molly is also going to put a link to these 3 questions or the prompt in the chat, so you'll be able to refer back to it.
Oh, Molly, let me jump in. I realize I did not describe, there's also an image, one of those pain charts, for the lack of better things. So on the screen, there's also, it goes from 0, little silly smiley faces or unsmiley faces, from 0, no hurt, to 2, hurts a little, all the way up to something about being hurts worse. So it's all the way down to 10 is awful. So anyway, that's just a little silly prompt. But basically, it's just how you doing today?
Here we go. Okay, everybody, we're just going to wait for people to finish trickling in here.
Sorry, everybody. All right, are we back? Everybody made it? Did everybody, this is one of those stupid questions. Did everybody make it back?
I think we got everybody, Giles.
Okay, wow, that will be miracle number one in today's conference here. All right, so I hope everybody met some new folks. I met a few new folks, which was great. And I hope, please, I think Dean said it as well, this conference is meant to help make connections. So send an email or a chat or whatever to somebody you just met, and try to keep up that little bit of a kindling of a relationship that we started here. All right, so again, we're going to go into session number one. That is, if you helped select this, by the way, this is, of course, a fully egalitarian conference. And so the conference topics were selected by all of you. And if you helped select it, thank you. The first session is Nobody Wants to Go to Your Zoom Thing Anymore. Engaging audiences in the era of coronavirus, which, by the way, was the overwhelming favorite topic. So that was clearly the winner. And I think, Mike, you are going to be the facilitator for this. Let me just remind you, keep your Zoom up. After the end of this, we'll have a 5-minute break before the next session. But Mike, we are all yours. And I'm going to stop my screen sharing so we can see everybody.
Yep. Actually, if it's okay with the group, I'm going to screen share for just a couple minutes at the beginning because I put together 3 questions. I'm not looking to break the unconference model. This is not a full presentation for everyone for the next 45 minutes, but I tried to come up with some questions to help frame a conversation about the changing relationship between historic sites and their audiences. So in just a moment, we can open up discussion on these 3 or anything else any other conversation that might be inspired by them. Don't expect anyone to be able to answer all 3 questions or have anything definitive to say about any of them. But the first question, I tried to be a little bit practical. Just what strategies are sites and organizations using to engage visitors during a full or partial shutdown? And if you're connected to any sites that have reopened in the past couple weeks or months, then any advice you can give from thinking back to the summer is great as well. I tried to write these in a way that could be answered both if you're a member of an organization trying to come up with events and programs for audience to engage with, but also if you're not, but you've been an audience member on any digital programs or any socially distanced programs, please feel free to weigh in from that perspective. The second question, thinking a little bit more generally about how audiences have changed. Does it seem like an organization you're connected to is trying to target different groups of people? If the audience has changed naturally around them, and how has the organization been able to adapt to that? And then the third one, what does it mean, this one, trying to get a little bit more abstract, what does it mean for someone to be part of an organization's community in this era? Does it feel like people are more connected or less connected? And does kind of the idea, I think a lot of historic sites think of themselves as community organizations. And what does that look like when the people in their immediate community aren't allowed to visit or aren't interested in visiting in person? So to start the conversation, I figured I'd answer the second question from the Baltimore Museum of Industry's perspective, really just my perspective from the education department at the BMI. Our audience has certainly gotten smaller, it feels, from our side, that we haven't had on-site visitors since the museum closed in March, and that feels like a major loss. And we're expecting, in the education department, we're expecting a much lower engagement numbers for our field trips this school year. But we are still doing virtual field trips and still having a robust calendar of public programs And we were expecting to have I think we were expecting a larger change in our audience, particularly over the summer. We were thinking that, rather than engaging with summer camps, we would see more individual families, families stuck at home wanting to do virtual things. And I at least was surprised that that didn't really seem to be the case. We still had summer camps, so we're trying to cobble something together over the summer, reaching out to us to do virtual programs. And we haven't really been able to really connect with like a larger homeschool or kind of the pod learning that's popping up this fall. I was expecting to have really kind of changing education landscape. And yet it seems like, at least for our audience, that people, particularly as we head into the fall and the school year, people are kind of sticking to their normal structures of engaging with museums as a family or as a school or as a camp group or something like that. But I'd be really interested in hearing from anyone who feels that isn't the case, anyone who's felt their audience change around them or feel like they're part of an audience that's changing. So with that, if anyone else has thoughts they'd like to share, please jump in. I've got as many faces as I can fit on my screen here. So if anyone does want, I might not be able to see everyone. If anyone has thoughts, they're welcome to just unmute and give a perspective from what you're seeing.
Well, hi, I'm Kelly, and I was just telling everybody in my small group that I'm not from Baltimore or Maryland. I'm from Virginia, and I work at a historic African American cemetery in Richmond, Virginia. Several cemeteries, actually. And before the pandemic, we already had a program in place for remote volunteering, but it wasn't very successful. It was through word of mouth, and I kind of had 5 or 6 people who volunteered on site who transitioned over into remote volunteering. But after the pandemic, suddenly remote volunteering picked up, and we went from like 5 or 6 volunteers to now over 300 remote volunteers. And we reached kind of a new demographic, because Evergreen Cemetery, where I work, is kind of in preservation mode. It's been neglected for many years, so a lot of community volunteers come out on site, but they're usually younger people, like college age, through like 30 somethings. But with the remote volunteering, we're able to reach more retired people who can't do like the physical manual labor of cutting down trees and things like that. So our demographics have changed in some ways. The amount of community involvement has picked up, because people are more interested in, like, I host biography writing opportunities. People can do genealogy research on those who are interred at the cemeteries. And then we also research like the civic organizations that African Americans were connected with back in like the 1890s through the late 2000s. I say late, like 2017. And so in that way, we've really re-engaged the community to be more focused on the history, specifically African American history in Richmond, which is pretty cool. And then your questions went away, so that I don't remember what the last one was.
Sorry about that. I was hoping to kind of, as we're opening up the discussion, to take down that screen sharing. The third question was, what does it mean for someone to be part of an organization's community in this era?
Yeah,
and I'm actually going to try to post that slide in the chat so that anybody can take a look at it in just a moment.
That'd be good. I took a picture of it, so I was trying to look at my phone to see what my phone says. So I guess being a part of the community has kind of changed, because people are having to redefine what community is. And so I'm noticing at first a resistance to be part of this kind of digital meeting, And still some of our older, specifically some of our more older retired people who are like 70 plus, 80, want to meet in person. They don't want to do digital things. It doesn't have the same feel, same connection as in person. But for those people who are able to adjust and to adapt a little better, they're getting more used to it. We're planning more meetings that are not work meetings, not focused on volunteering, but just getting to know you. Where are you at? How are you feeling? Kind of like you did with your icebreaker, just to connect with people on a different level, and to let them know that someone out there cares about them, and is thinking about them. And it's really cool because our Evergreen community has become, I guess, more widespread. We are reaching people from as far away as California who are volunteering with us remotely. And those are volunteers we never would have been able to reach for our on-site volunteering, which is a pretty cool thing. And so the story of Evergreen is spreading across our country, which I find amazing, that community can become so inclusive when people are so spread out.
Thanks for sharing, Kelly. That's another way that our audience at the BMI has changed a little bit, that we're seeing folks joining our public programs from much further away than normal. So having the digital programs to provide the opportunity to break down some of those geographic barriers. But again, I think less of a change than I was expecting, that we still haven't, it's not like we're getting hundreds of people begging for our field trips from all around the country quite yet. I also wanted to say that if anyone isn't able to share verbally, if you don't have the microphone set up or just aren't able to today, feel free to post comments in the chat, and anything that's addressed to the group, I'd be happy to read aloud.
I guess if I can just mention one or two things on, I'm Jack Burkert. I'm with the Museum of Industry, and Zoom has become my life lately. I guess maybe a lot of your lives lately, but we do a lot of lecture programs, history lectures, and I guess that's what I'm doing these days. I agree that with the Kelly, that the idea of a broader audience from all over the place. We get people, we've had people log in from Massachusetts, Missouri, California. In other words, we have a bigger reach than we ever had, which is really gratifying. I think that when I did the programs live versus via Zoom, I would have to say that I've watched the numbers pretty close to double in terms of attendance. I think that people like the idea of going to the meeting in their pajamas without driving anywhere. And so that's a real plus along the way. And I find it personally really easy, because I sit out here on my little porch in the nice weather and talk to this machine and take the message out. So yes, I think there's Zoom fatigue in places, because every time I open my email, I get 2 or 3 more invitations to Zoom meetings. So I think, the saturation point is certainly, I would think. So that's part of the problem. I think there are a couple keys to this. I've been doing seminars for 40. Yeah, I know it's hard to believe for me too. But I've done seminars all these years, and a couple of things. Promotion at the front end is really important, and it can't just be an email saying, come join us. It has to be more visual, more stunning in some way. I think the consistency of product is really important. Mike and I have been working on having, the last Tuesday of the month, Mike, or something like that, where people can depend upon a BMI lecture program on the last Tuesday, let's say, whatever we picked, I forget now, so that they can literally look forward to it. We have dates through the end of the year already. We have topics through the end of the year, and so between the promotion and the anticipation, if you have a good product, people will come back. It's really part of is part of the genetics of it. It's just one of those things where you have to have a product that people like, and then they have to have an expectation that you're going to do it again and again and again. So that's my 2 cents worth. And now I'll shut up and remute myself.
Absolutely, Jack. I think that marketing is raising some extra challenges and becoming really important as everyone's kind of fighting for attention. A bunch of different sites are fighting for everyone's attention and trying to get them to squeeze just a couple more hours out of their Zoom time each day. And I know that at the BMI, we seem to be relying so much on our social media coordinator, even more than usual, and are just really appreciative of her efforts. Thinking in terms of content, I'm curious if anyone if anyone has seen an organization put together a really interesting or anything unexpected in terms of either digital programs or something socially distanced on site. At the BMI, a lot of our programs are our public programs are frequently some kind of roundtable discussion or a presentation like what Jack was talking about. And we do virtual tours of the museum using the kind of like the 360-degree pictures like you see on Google Street View, moving from location to location in the exhibits. And we try to be as creative and dynamic with it as we can. But I'm also always interested to hear what other sites are doing to try to engage visitors and break up, not make it such a one-directional lecture style for a public program.
This is Jillian. I just wanted to say briefly, when you say mix it up, I will have to say I have heard such accolades about Baltimore Heritage's 5-minute little history thing, because we all are so burned out. And I like the Baltimore Architecture Foundation and Baltimore Heritage are also doing the 30-minute on Fridays. But it really helps when you just need a moment to get away, but you really can't commit a lot, to have that 5-minute. So I would say that maybe one of the things you also look is mix up in your programming instead of having a whole evening event, but having these little blasts, because what you do is then you pull them in and get them intrigued and they may go for the bigger program. So mix up the timing too, not just what's the focus.
I love that idea, and I've been loving the 5-minute heritage spots, because I even try to save them, but
it looks like we might be getting some connection issues from Kaylin. If you're able to join us, and I'm sure we'll all like to hear Kaylin, what you have to share in just a minute.
It's perfect. It's perfect time.
Though they're never 5 minutes. I like that part because it's funny. Boo!
We're going to take up a collection and buy John's a stopwatch, okay?
Hey, Mike, are you talking about just generally programming itself? Anything? Anybody on Twitter has probably seen the Minneapolis History or Minnesota History Center. There's a project there called something about the Hearts, where they went out, created wood, weatherproof hearts, and took a fence over and just invited the community to express themselves. And it was, I think, the genesis was of reading the public and what they needed, versus just giving them content. It seems to have become very popular. And it's just one of those responsive, what can we do to help people come together, safe, it's outdoors, express themselves, and show that we are part of, we're listening to you. And because I think a lot of, and I don't work in the museum, so I don't have to drive attendance. I'm curious, as a later question, to find out anybody who's making decisions, if if you're talking about criteria for success or your outcomes, are you, but that's a question for later. Are you thinking through what you need to do, why you're doing what you're doing, and to what impact, other than, staying afloat, keeping people engaged? I'd be curious to know if people are putting that thought into it and going like, other than doing what we continue to do, is there, why are we doing this? How are we connecting? And what do people need? Those kinds of questions. So I'll shut up there. Let's get back to it.
This is Shantae, and so with the Baltimore National Heritage Area, and we don't have a museum per se. We are really, some people have referred to us as glue, some have referred to us as an umbrella, because our goal is to promote and to help celebrate all of the institutions that are in Baltimore and in the region with the history and the culture. So what I have enjoyed is it'll come across as being very self-absorbed or self-centered, is that we have been working to promote each and every one of our museums that are doing things that are virtual. So as someone said earlier, it's important to get that word out and the marketing and the communication. So what we've been doing is we have been engaging with each of you to put your stuff on our social media. It almost looks like we're trying to, hog the scene, but it's really not about that. What we are trying to do, even though it attracts people to our website and to our Facebook or Instagram, is really to highlight all of the great museums and all of the programs that you all are doing virtually. So I am more delighted to hear about what's going on. And absolutely, John deserves a degree, an award for his 5-minute segments on introducing Baltimore to people all across the country and possibly internationally. Because what's important about that is when things do go back to some semblance of normalcy, I don't know when that'll be, then it will bring people to Baltimore. As a heritage area and a heritage institution, our goal is to bring Baltimore, people to Baltimore, to visit our sites, to enjoy the city, to see our fabulous architecture and get to know Baltimore beyond the news clip. So I think that I would give a standing ovation to all of the organizations that are doing online virtual programming. And please, if any way, just engage with us so that we can get it out to the people that we connect with, and share that with your friends, family, colleagues in different places so that they can see what we're doing here. So I'll be quiet now.
If I could pop in if there's appropriate. Hi, this is Mike French from the Baltimore City Historical Society. And we've just, we did Zoom at the tail end of our program year last spring as just, sort of seat of our pants thing, because we had this Baltimore History Evening series. We canceled our March one, but we did April, May, and June on Zoom. And we're planning our new year will be starting, well, we're going to have a thing a presentation in October, but our Baltimore History Evenings, we're at the Village Learning Place. We'll be planning those virtually. If we get back together, we'll still do them by Zoom. We're looking for a hybrid year once we can get together. The neat thing about Zoom, not only does it expand our geographic reach, people who don't want to come into Charles Village because they think it's dangerous to see a presentation, they can tune in. But it also lets us record things and build an archive in a way that was difficult because of lighting and other conditions before. So we do two things at once. We reach a broader audience and we build an archive. And I think that's a tremendous opportunity.
Hi, everyone. I'm Catherine Mayfield. I work for the Maryland Center for History and Culture. And a lot of what's being said here sounds very familiar with us too. When the shutdown happened, virtual programs are really our primary way to reach out to our audience. And what we did as an institution is we began doing weekly programs. I agree with Mike. The same thing happened with us of, well, one, there was reaching a much broader audience than our typical audience that would come into our building to see programs in person. We were reaching out to others in the library community with a library focused program about responsive collecting. We've done programs about redlining, the Black freedom struggle. The redlining one saw almost 1,000 visitors, which is really incredible for us. When you think about, in person, maybe we have a couple dozen people at a lecture at a time. So really wide reach. And the other opportunity there is that all of these programs have been recorded and they are available online. So we have a new website, mdhistory.org, which we're really excited about. Fresh new look there and lots of great new content. But you can find all of those videos and watch whenever you have time, because that's absolutely a reality. There's so many wonderful programs right now. And so that way you can have that opportunity, when you have that time to watch those. But I also want to give a shout out to the 5-minute videos, because those have been a treasure in this time too, of so much content being out there.
I want to piggyback off of that a little bit. I do not work for a museum. I work for a local government. I work for the Baltimore City Planning Department. And one of the things that we as government agencies have had to do is shift all of our public hearings, city council hearings, all those hearings have had to go online and have had to become digital. And in fact, and I don't want to speak for everybody. But, one thing that I understand has been happening is with, at least with planning departments and commissions across the country. I understand that, New York City Planning Commission, like some of their commission hearings will be online in the future going forward, period, because they found that they're so inclusive. More people can participate, like the civil, the civic discourse is so much more accessible to so many more people because it's online. And so I guess, a question that I have for folks is, you guys all have done a tremendous job pivoting to meet the moment. But I'm just curious about moving forward, even when we, are able to meet in person all together in enormous groups, are some of these things that you're doing now things that you want to carry forward into the future?
Hi, my name is Jacob Benson. Actually, Lauren, thank you for bringing this up, because I actually was going to bring the exact same topic up. I work for Harford County Department of Planning and Zoning. I'm the historic preservation planner, so I am under the Department of Planning and Zoning. And that actually was something the exact topic I was going to bring up, because we have also had to shift all of our public meetings, our Preservation Commission, which is the one that I work with, as well as all of our other commissions, online. And actually, that was something that our commission has been in at the beginning of discussions with. No real set decisions have been made yet. But that was something we have been sort of toying around with moving forward, is having hybrid public meetings, in which we will go back to having the in-person meeting at our, in the conference room at the administrative building, but also finding a way to be able to also simultaneously make it available online in order to, open up our outreach and open up our ability to reach more people. Something we have struggled with as a Preservation Commission is outreach and making sure that we can reach as many people as possible. And so we're just looking at new tools and new ways to do so. It's kind of sad that a global pandemic is what had to happen to find some of these things, but we've been sort of looking at it as an opportunity to find new ways to outreach.
I think what most of us are realizing is, maybe a few people were already on the Zoom train of doing things before, but really we all probably could have been for some years now, and we just didn't get pushed into having to do it. We didn't have we weren't forced to do it, and a lot of us being small and poor organizations, it's hard to make the leap when if you've got successful things or what feel like successful things. And now I think, we certainly feel like, it would have to be a permanent part of something we'd always do, is offer things on Zoom, and even when we can also offer things in person, whether they're simultaneous or whether they're just separate things, because there are going to be people who we're missing right now that we can get back when we go back to in person, but you know, there's always going to be this extra audience of Zoom people who would never be able to come in person. So I think everybody almost responsibly would have to be, you know, factoring that in as part of their grander picture of everything they're going to be offering going forward. I did want to ask a somewhat different question of everyone too, is, has anyone encountered any issues with people having concerns about the sessions being recorded, either from the speakers or from audience members deciding, well, I don't know, and dropping out or anything like that? Or does anyone have any tips or things about disclaimers, or, you know, whether just saying something at the beginning or whether putting something on a registration email as a disclaimer, any issues around any of that anyone's run into anything with? I'll speak for me, as I have questions about it. I've only really run into it with a speaker that had concerns about their content being available later or being available when they weren't live with it or things like that, but not anything from the audience yet. But I'm just kind of wondering if anybody has any insights into any legal issues around that, or things they've heard.
I have a little bit to say about that, which is that so if people know or don't know, Maryland is a two-party consent state for recording. So technically, for legal things, you do have to have the consent of all parties in order to record stuff, which a lot of people were not necessarily aware of when they started using Zoom. And I know that internally at my institution, now every all-staff meeting, if it is going to be recorded, starts off with kind of a disclaimer, or if it's not going to be recorded, also starts off with a disclaimer that the institution is not consenting to anyone else recording. I participated in a professional development thing last night from the Smithsonian Museum of African Art, and they actually had, like, on their little Zoom box a kind of a pop-up come up that said, like, hey, if you are participating in this, you are consenting to be recorded. We've also had to work that out with our docents for their docent meetings, of figuring out if we're going to be recording things, especially for training purposes later, because we're starting out like training a small pod of docents on virtual tours, and then we'll open it up later on. But yeah, it's important. I think it's a thing that you can include beforehand, but I think there has to be some kind of disclaimer that if people are continuing to do these things, and it's going to be recorded, that it is going to be recorded.
This is Jillian again. I have another question for people about this whole recording stuff, because I think it's great. I think we needed to move here sooner. Whenever I miss something because something else is at that night, I go, shoot, I wanted to hear that. And there's no other way to get at that but to be there. So I think this has been incredible, because in some ways we're also recording history, the history of us learning about history. And so I'm kind of curious if people thought about how that lives on. If they're recording these things, are we going to expect YouTube forever just to fill up with all this stuff? Or I mean, how in 30 years, when someone wants to look back and understand this period, how do they get at this stuff? And I'm just curious, from the idea of a person who does historical research, how people thought about archiving the recording.
I think that's a really interesting question. I wanted to just jump in to give, I think we're coming up on about 5 or 6 minutes before we head to the our break between topics. If anyone does have any thoughts about how their institution is preserving things during this time when so many things are digital, I think that's a great topic. I also noticed there was a hand up a couple minutes ago. Don't want to call anyone out, but if you had a thought that you wanted to share before we had those great questions from Jamie and from Jillian, feel free to circle back. And I know that these are big questions being raised. If anyone wants to drop comments in chat, that will be preserved, and we'll be sharing the chat afterwards. So I might be able to get some extra thoughts in the 5 minutes we have left.
Hi, this is Clarissa. My hand was up because I don't have anything to say about the recording piece. That's complicated. I'm just actually an audience member. So I guess from my perspective, I wanted to say that first of all, I live in Tunisia and I have a house in Baltimore, but I love Zoom because now I can do this stuff. I could never do this otherwise. I love John's 5-minute histories. I'd never miss one. And the other things that you're talking about at BMI and so forth, I don't know about them. So I would be excited to participate more in those. And the one thing I would say, but I have been going to city council meetings for the first time ever, but be aware of the time differences. So historically, people like to do things in the evenings, but not only could we be more geographically free, but also time zone free, because if you do something at 7 p.m., that's midnight for me. So actually doing something in the morning is better. Just that's my thoughts on from the audience perspective. Thanks.
I want to just jump in a minute. At Morgan, we are recording all of our classes. And we, of course, tell the students that we're doing that. But we are also saving our recordings to the cloud, because that way we're not necessarily dependent upon a particular platform that we don't control. So that might be something for the institutions to think of. One other thought I had, though, is that I'm more familiar with the church world, having adapted to Zoom. And they're finding that, of course, they're reaching lots of people who normally would not get dressed up to come to church on a Sunday, but they can roll out of bed and flip on Zoom, no matter what their condition or attire. And so they're thinking that they're going to try to continue that in some manner. But there's a concern that may also be a concern for the various museums and historical societies. How do you encourage the people who are only tuning in via Zoom to contribute financially? You can get financial support from those people who walk through the doors, but what do you do going forward if you're offering this great service and this great content?
That is certainly a piece. I think the financial side of things, it feels like this big complication to everything that I end up planning for the Baltimore Museum of Industry, because it's so easy to come up with ideas that, you know, I can imagine an audience would really enjoy, and, you know, it seems like it fits in with the museum's mission really well, but then trying to raise money from it, or expecting people to pay for something where they're just, you know, maybe logging in for a short time, not even leaving their house. It just feels like such a different relationship. Thinking about the changing relationship between audience members and institutions, like there's an economic aspect to that relationship that's now changed. Combining that with Jamie's question about any issues with things being recorded, one issue that we run into is that if we do make something if we take a ticketed program or a program that normally someone would pay for, record it, you know, host the program, record it, and post it online for free, then it kind of destroys our ability to market it in the future, to either repeat that program and sell tickets. And it also makes it so we can't really charge for it in the first place, because why are people, you know, paying for it if they can get it for free later? So I think in terms of what our museum is willing to record and post afterwards, the only limitation we're seeing isn't really legal so much as financial, that we unfortunately need to maintain the institution's revenue stream.
I'm actually, my name's Martha. I also work at the Maryland Center for History and Culture, which is formerly the Maryland Historical Society. We changed our identity last week. So if you haven't already heard, check out our new website. But I work on our public programs team, and this is something that we're really struggling with. And I'm still amazed that there's no perfect platform out there, that, you know, we need to find someone who works for a cultural nonprofit and also has software engineering skills and give them the tools that they need, because we're struggling to to do exactly that. This is the first time we've really been able to offer our programs for free, which is really exciting for us. And that's why we've seen a big increase in our accessibility and our attendance. But on the income side, our accounting department is also wondering why we're not able to, see some money generated. And so we're just now starting to figure out how to do a pay-as-you-wish donation model for people who are signing up for our programs. I've seen a couple of other museums and libraries across the country working on this, but it's hard, and it's not an intuitive thing that is out there. We're kind of going through a lot of different ways and means and finding some barriers with the system. So if anyone knows someone who's looking to, start an amazing product, I think there's a market out there.
Mike, are you gonna cut us off or not?
Yes, no, I was going to say I see John's jumping in with the timer, which we do want to keep on schedule today. I just want to thank everyone for the conversation. I also just want to give a shout out to everyone who's been posting in the comments and giving praises of other organizations. The chat has become such a great calendar of events now, and promotional opportunity for everything going on in Baltimore. So hopefully everyone will enjoy reading through that when we share it afterwards. And with that, I'll turn it over to Johns.
But it is not a substitute for tuning into the lightning talks. The chat room is not a lightning talk substitute. All right, we're gonna take a 5-minute break. Molly's gonna put the countdown timer up. Thank you, everybody. Stay tuned. We're going to come back with ethics in archiving, and which is almost like a continuation of this recording discussion. And I think in an unconference spirit, we've already seen that the conversation can go really wherever anybody wants it to go. So go do some power yoga, stretch, and come back in 5 minutes. We'll see you.
Oops.
It's going to be exciting to see what happens when the doomsday clock hits 0. We're going to have a mushroom cloud, or what actually does happen.
Yeah, I didn't know you were here. There you are. I think this is very calming. That's why I picked this.
I'm a fan of it. I like it.
Thanks. Okay, I don't know what's going to happen.
All right. Boom.
We have a lot of people back.
Yeah. All right, everybody. I hope you're still there. We made it through our 5-minute countdown clock. Some of us were speculating what would actually happen when it hit 0. There was no explosion or meltdown. So that's miracle number 2 in the unconference. Again, thanks for hanging in there with us. I think we're what's the word? Pivot. We're pivoting. We are in the midst of pivoting. So thanks for joining and participating. I did get in the break a couple suggestions. One is, if you feel comfortable when you speak, maybe identify yourself. And if you feel comfortable identifying your gender identity, it might help anybody who wants to follow up with you. So again, if you're comfortable with it, please feel free to do that. And then second, I will have to say a big phew that we told everybody that we're recording this. That was, I will say that we totally researched that and really were on top of it. That's not true at all, but again, we are recording this. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Amanda Phillips DeLucas and Allison Saylor to lead us in our next session. All right, Amanda, Allison, all yours.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Amanda Phillips DeLucas. I just put a link in the chat to a Google note sheet where I'm going to be taking notes on this session. So if you want to reference that during the conversation, feel free. So welcome to the second session of Bmore Historic 2020, roughly titled Ethics of Archiving the Moment. I am a postdoctoral research associate at the Carey Institute of Ecosystem Studies, but I'm trained as a historian and social scientist. I'm co-hosting this session with Allison Saylor, who will introduce herself momentarily. So to reiterate just quickly, if you would like to participate in this discussion, use the raise hand function to signal your participation. You'll be unmuted by, you'll unmute yourself. And please try to keep the comments brief so that as many people can participate as possible. So to start off this discussion, Allison and I want to introduce 2 possible topics to frame the question, what are the ethics of archiving the moment? We might broadly place these topics in the categories of one, structural concerns, and two, practitioner concerns. I myself am not an archivist, but when I was asked to moderate this session, I kept thinking about infrastructure. So for instance, what does it mean when our modes of interaction are reduced to a fairly limited number of proprietary softwares such as Zoom, Facebook, or other social networks? And I think this dovetails really nicely with the previous conversation is while video recordings of events and public hearings or community meetings can be saved, these are undoubtedly going to require a lot more storage space than institutions are currently capable of storing. And I also think it raises a number of privacy questions, not just sort of permissions from people, but how will these be stored on, let's say, Facebook servers or other proprietary systems. I think I'm also interested in how software has contained and enables certain forms of communication during the pandemic, and how those communications have the ability to be archived. So for instance, here, we text message every day. We know that messaging companies or wireless companies keep logs of messages. And so that's basically a privatized archive. But what ways are historians or even just people in general trying to preserve their communications through this moment? I'm going to pass the floor over to Allison now, where she can introduce herself and moderate, and I will be taking notes during the session where you can follow along. So Allison, passing it off to you.
Thanks, Amanda. I appreciate that. So hi, everyone. I'm Allison. I work at Hopkins at the Sheridan Libraries, and I'm sort of in a public historian role, but also work within the archives team. And that's sort of where my professional history has been. I worked at the Maryland State Archives and the B&O Railroad Museum as their archivist. So this is really an interesting and relevant topic for us today. And I'm excited to get some opinions from people and thoughts from people that have interactions with archives, but maybe aren't necessarily archivists themselves. So one of the things that I've been thinking about specifically with this topic is related to the university's initiatives to collect around COVID-19. And they're asking for students and staff and faculty to submit their own experiences, narratives, photographs, sharing what's happening to them during this pandemic. And obviously, the goal of archivists at this time is to ensure that this information is captured, preserved, and eventually made accessible for educational purposes and just general reflection by society and future historians. But I think sometimes we're quick to say collect, and we don't always think about the related trauma and harm that people contributing their experiences to these things might experience in reliving or sharing this information. So that's sort of what interested me in this topic. So I also have some questions about accessibility. How do we provide access to submissions long-term? As Amanda mentioned, storage is an issue for digital things. How do we make these efforts more participatory and assure that we reach a diverse set of contributors? Why are we collecting? What do we hope to do with what we collect? And I also wonder about supporting activists in this moment in creating their own archives, rather than asking them to submit something and claiming it for our institutions. How do we become a resource for our community and shift to a people-centered approach? And how do we help protect the activist community? And I know that a lot of people have been in that conversation, particularly if you participated in the Baltimore Uprising archive at the Maryland Center for History and Culture. So just throwing those ideas out there as conversation starters. And I'm happy to discuss this, in any avenue that you guys want to follow. And I'll add those questions to Amanda's notes just so you all have them in written form. Oh, actually, it looks like she's already doing it. So thanks, Amanda.
I tried to get as much as I can.
Okay. I know there's an initiative at the Maryland Center for History and Culture if you guys, to collect COVID-related documents. So I don't know if any of you would like to speak about that at all, or your experiences with ethical issues for that project.
I can speak a little to it, but I'm hoping that Kate might come back soon. Oops, she's actually the director of our library and had a really big role in creating our Collecting in Quarantine initiative, which we tried to launch relatively soon after we all started working from home. And she really was, there she is, she really was working through a lot of those ethical issues and trying to piece those together. So I'll let Kate talk.
Hey everyone. Yeah, so I'd say for us it was a process, and that it still is. When we closed our doors, we wanted to begin collecting, and we put that out really quickly too. We wanted to start getting some stories as people were experiencing the beginning of the pandemic. That when we kind of delve into our collections looking for material about past pandemics, there really isn't as much as we might think. And so we think, that opportunity to collect in moment means being able to capture these experiences at different times through the pandemic, different experiences. I'd say our process changed a lot and over the time that we launched the program, and it is a different process as well from our what we consider our typical physical donations. We changed up our deed of gift specifically for this program, and we were really looking for guidance and to see what other programs are doing, what guidance was coming from the Society of American Archivists. So that was a really important resource for us. For our deed of gift, we actually took a template that the Society of American Archivists had in their responsive collecting toolkit available online, and we modified it for our own. What they're comfortable with. They could sign over full copyright if that's what they wanted. They could sign over most rights except for certain things that they want to make sure that they maintain, or they could maintain all of their copyright and provide us certain permissions for exhibition or for making available for research. So that was something that was different for us. And I think that we're still, still learning and still looking for opportunities to hear from other archives about what they're doing. In terms of making accessible, what we did initially is part of our goal beyond the collecting piece was sharing and trying to have others, letting others be able to find this content, this information in the moment so that we could share in experiences. That was something as archivists that was really, I think, impactful for us, where we were, working from home, not really interacting with many others except our colleagues online. And so to have this interaction with the donors and to see these experiences that were in some ways similar to our own, sometimes different, where we're hearing a new perspective, was very meaningful and impactful, I think, during this very stressful time of working. So we began sharing posts to our Underbelly blog, which is online, and we're still thinking about that long-term process of the archiving. We do have a new DAMS, digital asset management system, and so we're working on that workflow to have create records for each of the items that has been donated to us, and thinking about that long-term making available online through digital collections.
If I could also jump in here, I'm Vivian Barnett also from the Maryland Center for History and Culture. I'm the curatorial assistant. So from the museum side of things, we've also accessioned some objects that relate to what's going on right now too. So recently we accessioned 2 masks that were made for a child's dolls by a parent to kind of encourage her child to wear a mask. So that's just an interesting way that objects can also tell the story of what's happening right now. And Kate, I've also been doing a lot of data entry on the dams to try to help make some of that information accessible to the public. So I'm new to the museum, but it's really great to be able to engage with the public and make this information available too.
Yeah, thank you both for sharing more about that project. It's helpful to hear kind of, I think the one thing I did attend the webinar that you guys hosted, and I think one of the biggest takeaways for me was that it's ever changing, right? Like, you know, you have to readjust and, you know, assess your workflow as you go along and, you know, as materials are submitted and, you know, so it's not set in stone, which is usually how our profession works, is that there's, you know, policies and procedures. And so I think we have to be a lot more flexible in this world, in this environment. Does anyone else have any thoughts they'd like to share? Johns, I see a hand.
Sorry, I'm not sure I know how to raise my hand and I'm sorry, everybody. But Jack Burkert mentioned that he had given, he's giving talks for the Baltimore Museum of Industry. And I know Jillian Storms has given Zoom talks for us and the Baltimore Architecture Foundation, all of which are being recorded. So I'd be interested to hear the thoughts on speakers from people who have done speaking, what they feel about being recorded and shared and archived. Is that something you're thinking about? You know, you're all for it. You're kind of have some trepidation. I'd be curious to see, like, on that end of things.
Johns, have you called on me? Is that what you've done?
You have less than 5 minutes, Jack.
All right, well, I'll do my best. I'll start my stopwatch that I'm going to give you later. Yes, I am a speaker. I have all these programs I do and that sort of thing. Those are intellectual property to me, to be very simple. I've heard all of the commentary of everybody, and I agree with everything that's been said, except that the financial side of this says I have to maintain control, period. And when you stop and contemplate how many hours it took for me on my own to develop a program, how many books I bought, how many books I read, how many people I bought lunch for so that I could talk to them at some length, you know, it's a significant amount of money. I will never recoup what I have in it. Okay, in fact, I don't even intend to try. But I do honor the museum in trying to enhance their revenue by maintaining control. We offer a program to a group. They pay a fee. If I put it out on YouTube the next day, they feel cheated and the program has no value later. So, you know, I heard the wonderful lady from overseas say, you know, hey, what about the time difference? I empathize with you, and I'll try to make sure that my folks do morning programs for you, but I can't always control that. So without belaboring the point, let me just say, it's an intellectual property, not a product, not a charitable institution, okay? And I'm really sorry about that, but money makes the world go round in this particular case. So.
I think there is a difference, Johns, for people who make a living out of the stuff that they're doing and those who are doing it because they have a passion about it, but they have a day job. And I do think that you have to treat those different. You have to have the sensitivity to know what type person you're dealing with. For me, I have a day job and I do the history stuff because I'm just curious and I love it and I love getting feedback and I like getting people involved. And to me, if it's just in my pocket, it just dies. It's just another time that history dies before it gets out to a wider audience. So for me, it's like, spread it. But I have a day job. So I think there has to be a sensitivity when you deal with people who are in need of funds for all the work that they do.
Can I just add one little follow-up, if I might? And it's a very good point. And mine is a retirement job, and so I don't know if it's a day job or a part-time job or what it is, but nonetheless, what I'm trying to do is maximize revenue for the museum. And yeah, they pay me a few bucks to do it, but that's not in the equation. But I will say that everything I've done, all my files, we're making recordings of the sessions as I do them. All of that is being turned over to the museum for their archives. Okay, back to the original topic, Allison. Okay, but the point is I'm trying. While I'm around, and maybe they'll find somebody else to do this when I decide to retire. Really, the fact is that it's going to be theirs. Okay, it is their product ultimately. Right now, it happens to be my product, but I'm slowly shifting that to them. They'll have ownership. They'll have training materials. They'll have every possibility of doing so, and if they're worthy, it's interesting. If I might, I'm not the kind of person who creates history for historians. I'm a person who creates history for the public. Okay, so they're not all footnoted and annotated. What they are is a lot of fun to attend, and that was my point. So I think that what I'm trying to do is move all that to the museum. And now I will shut up, John. Okay.
I just want to follow up on Jack adding from the administrator side of the BMI. I'm glad he mentioned that we are recording them for internal use, just for training purposes and to have a record of the presentations that he's developed in partnership with the BMI. So I think that kind of raises another question: is do institutions have an obligation to archive things that because they're sharing them with the public, or do they have an obligation to archive these just because they've developed them and because it's part of the institutional memory? And so I think that's a question as well. Even if something isn't being, should everything be recorded, not so that our audience can watch it later, but so that we can reference it later? And then how does that change kind of accession policies? Apologize, I'm not an archivist.
Yeah, I think that's a great line of reasoning. Whether or not, what is your intention behind collecting something? So there's been a few things in the chat, just throwing it over there for a second. I love this comment from Kate. I worry sometimes about crowdsourced in the moment collecting because who's doing the crowdsourcing? That will limit who's in the crowd, and if these projects become the historical record, whose voices are written out from the jump. And I think that that's something we've been talking about in the archival field for a while now, is, silences and, I think there's this term that's come out as the activist archivist. And so I think that we've sort of some people have taken on identities to correct past silences by widening what we collect now. So just throwing that out there as something to marinate on.
So my work is sort of distinctly in the environmental field right now, which I think often has somewhat different modes of engagement from public history. But what I want to, what this is bringing up in the moment to me is this talk about, well, can we enable activists or maybe community groups to build their own archives? But we don't necessarily provide them with the infrastructural support or guidance to be able to do that. And we assume a lot about the capacities of organizations to be able to do work that an institution might be able to do. And I see that a lot in environmental projects throughout the city, like money being given for parks, but then resources not being provided for maintenance, or assuming that a community will have the ability to maintain them over time. And I worry about that a lot in the sort of public history space as well, is what are the resources that an institution may think of as proprietary, but are actually really needed in order to build community capacity to do these projects that we think would be interesting or engaging as sort of these bottom-up histories.
So I'll just throw, it's a little bit quiet. I'll throw another question out there. Are there any folks in the room who have worked with communities on archiving projects, or maybe you would want to speak to Amanda's point about providing support or resources for groups like that?
Hi, my name is Megan McShay, and I'm an archivist, and I live here in Baltimore. I've been working in an institution in DC for years, but I recently left, and I'm starting to talk a little bit to communities, community groups, small organizations about their archives. And what's really striking to me coming from an institutional setting is just that capacity issue that Amanda spoke to so well. There's just no infrastructure, and just starting to think about where, professional communities might be able to step in and provide support. And I guess I keep wondering if there's any appetite in Baltimore among people who care about local work that's going on in history, to build some sort of centralized resources that people, groups, individuals can go to and say, like, oh, if I need digital storage, I know there's this space that I can go to. If I need climate controlled storage, I know there's this space. Just something that can sort of collectively try to meet some of those needs and be available.
If nobody else is jumping in, can I jump in, Allison, Amanda? So about 15 years ago, we at Baltimore Heritage started what we were calling the Baltimore Neighborhood Archive Project. And it was literally me going to neighborhood association board members who had shoeboxes full of old correspondence stuck in their attics somewhere. And then we worked with the University of Baltimore in their special collections to get them into an archive. And I think UB still has that. But it's interesting, and I'd be very interested in folks who are working with neighborhood associations, or folks like Mike French, who's with the Baltimore City Historical Society, which is an all-volunteer group. Of like, it used to be you'd save all your minutes from your meetings and all the agendas, and you'd put them in that shoebox, and then you'd hand it to the next volunteer board president who should do the same, and then hopefully the shoebox got saved and it would go to UB. But now that all these meetings are online, are people at the community level, is anybody thinking about that? Is that I know we have our Baltimore Heritage meetings on Zoom, and I haven't given a single thought to what we're doing archiving it. So I'd be curious to hear if any other, especially sort of smaller community level folks, are thinking about that.
Well, Mike French here, since Johns has given me the opportunity. I've been waiting to hop in anyway. I've been involved with both the Baltimore City Historical Society and lots of community organizations. And even BCHS, I think, has an inadequate understanding of the importance of archives as we consider our, location and office space and such. I think a lot of organizations view these as a liability rather than an asset when they think about them. I've been trying to persuade other organizations that have had, archives to, some like the Baltimore Folk Music Society that's been around for 40 years has this splendid archive, but to get them to do something with it other than to transfer it from member to member house is a real problem. And I think the issue with a lot of organizations is just getting the word out that these things are important, but then, not just present them with a problem, but present them with a solution. And so I don't know whether the University of Baltimore thing is still going. I hear mixed things about that, and some people are not particularly trustful of that archive. But I know there's a lot of good stuff out there. And I know the Baltimore City Archives have some community archives, but I don't know whether they're, eager to get cardboard boxes dumped on them.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Johns. Yeah, there's a ton of sort of questions in this sort of broad ethics in archiving that I think we can continue to talk about. I just want to point to the chat again, just so everyone's aware that there's lots of chatter going on in there and more questions about, um, the quantity of community archives initiatives, like, do more of them make us stronger, weaker? Would a network be more productive? And then also just questions about, just because we can record something, does that mean we need to? And then also projects collecting COVID-19 stories, and whether or not that maybe takes away from collecting other materials, I think is the point Tara was making. So, I think one of the things that I wanted to mention is last year my colleague Kristen Deal and I, who's the processing archivist at Hopkins, we did a session about archiving or collecting documents related to the Garland sit-in at Johns Hopkins University, which was a movement by students to occupy the administrative building. And so we were trying to make sure that event was documented within the archives, excuse me, not only from the perspective of the administration, which is something we're obligated to collect, but also from the students' perspective and the participants' perspective. So, but I think some of the issues that came up with that, are ones along the same lines of this conversation, ethical ones about protecting the identity of contributors, also issues of, like building trust with the community that we were collecting documents from. And so I just wanted to add those couple thoughts of, ethical issues in collecting. And, I think that can also be applied to collecting during a pandemic. How do you build a relationship with people that, we're only seeing virtually? And how do you build that trust for them to want to give you their material? So just also throwing those ideas out there. I know we are approaching time. We have about 18 minutes left. So I don't know if there's any other thoughts or subjects or questions that people want to throw out into the conversation. You can feel free. I don't want to talk too much.
This is Kaylin. I just wanted to mention that at my museum that I worked at in Atlanta, they did a collecting process with the community where they had children interview their own grandparents in the community, and then they collected that information. They did audio recordings and then provided that to the museum. And that was a great way for us to not only connect with the community, but to actually get the history of that community, which was being gentrified at the time. So, there were a lot of African Americans that were being moved out, but the ones that were still there had a lot of history that they were able to talk about. And, during this pandemic, that's something also to think about is like, families are together now, and it's one way where they don't have to actually go out and risk anything. They could just stay right at home and interview their parents and, things like that. It's just something to think about.
Well, I can say, and Dean probably knows this as well, the Peel, Nancy Proctor has a side project that she's been working on for probably about 4 or 5 years called Be Here, Baltimore. and they have been doing recordings of citizens of Baltimore, their life in Baltimore, what they remember, different historical events that happened in Baltimore, and it's all done and it's live and available. So it's on WebMuse, I believe it is. Dean, is it WebMuse or is it just BeHereBaltimore.org? You know?
You can go to the Peel, P-E-A-L-E website, folks, like Peel Center or Peel, and there'll be a link. It used to be, it started with WebMuse, or WebMuse, that is, but I don't know what it is now.
I don't either.
It's been going on for years now. Must be a good 5 years.
Mm-hmm. And that's what they're doing. And she's still taking recordings. When we were able to be in person, they were having sessions where people could go in and they could actually record it. And there's an online, a telephone kind of like app that you would download, and you would just tell your story. And then it would just upload to this Be Here Baltimore archived storytelling, because they do a lot of storytelling at the Peel. That's one of the things that the Peel is very involved in, is storytelling and how to tell stories. She's even had Aaron Hankins from WYPR come in, because his On the Block podcast, had him come in and show you how to tell stories or to engage people to tell their story. Even interesting is that they have a little, I don't know how many is in it, but it's a little deck of cards that shows people how to ask questions to get people more engaged, because sometimes people kind of freeze up and they're not sure where to go with telling a story. But they have this wonderful little card deck that you can interview people and get your story. So like a StoryCorps kind of podcast. So that's a great way to engage people when they come to your museum about their experience and what they thought of the exhibit. And so that's an option.
That's great information. And we got lucky because Aaron Henkin actually came to Atlanta and interviewed us at the museum as well as that community. So that was pretty cool.
I want to put the deck of cards up to my screen. Out of the blocks. They're very tough questions, many of them. I pulled them out one day just to, thinking I might use them as icebreakers for my meetings, and I went, oh boy, they're probing. They can be really probing and personal to some extent, but sparking conversations among people who probably know each other.
Where do you get those, Dean?
I don't know, Michael. The Peel, when there was a physical, when we were walking in, they were sold at the Peel, and then the Peel is under renovation. It's been using the Carroll Mansion or the Carroll Museums on Lombard and Jones Falls. So I don't know. I think WYPR may sell them. The Peel, on the websites. I guess we'd take a look. Take a look at different websites to see if they're sold.
I kind of want to circle back to the discussion from earlier in the morning about recording, and I think that it would be interesting to sort of bring that back to this conversation. I'm interested in hearing from other people who are recording a lot of events, how they're thinking about sort of the archival capacities of their institutions to save videos. I mean, is stuff just going on YouTube and that's sort of what you're thinking about for the repository, or are there bigger questions about, do you get cloud, purchase cloud space? What are the ethics of doing that through different companies? How are those sort of larger infrastructural institutional questions playing out for people?
So I can jump in here. Hi, Molly with Baltimore Heritage. Just to give a real-time update on that, I have just sent my husband out to buy an external hard drive because this program right here is 5 hours long or so, and I don't think I have enough storage on my computer. So, to download this to have a recording. And so this is something that is coming up right now, like how, and I had to buy more storage on our Google Drive this morning. So not to, put my problems on you or anything, but this absolutely is, pivoting into this virtual world, and then, getting questions like, where is this recording going to be? And I think it's my responsibility as the reporter to tell you guys where it's going to be, about when it's going to be, and that sort of thing. So, and these are things that I hadn't thought about. So, yeah.
Yeah, at the BMI, the digital storage for large files is definitely an issue. So it's a matter of, especially now with the downturn of people coming in revenue, we have to worry about conserving space for any new digital files that we bring in. So it is something that we have to consider and budget for, but it's also something that we kind of have to plan ahead for. So if we have collections that we know we need to digitize, that's something that's going to be done down the road. So we have digital storage. I just purchased for myself a 4 terabyte drive, and I'm actually pretty impressed that it was kind of cheap. So I'm hoping down the road it won't be as much of an issue to purchase additional digital storage on site.
For Baltimore Heritage, I hope Molly got a cheap one too.
Are there any concerns about any of these devices and media becoming archaic?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Drives typically, they do have a shelf life. You have to replace your drives to be safe. I would replace mine every 5 years just to be safe, because you never know if you're going to get that one faulty drive that's going to break down after a year, and then boom, everything's gone. So definitely you want to keep purchasing new options if you're doing external. But for cloud-based services, I think that would be a safer bet if you were looking for more long-term storage without having to worry about the mechanics of an external drive failing.
So the hardware you put it on is one thing. The other is what file type it is. I'm just curious if there are some file types that I just learned recently that, there's certain PDF file types that are more archival than others, which I didn't know. So I would be curious to know, is there one type of movie type file or video file that is more preservable than others?
I know for my work in oral history, the master files that we use are WAV files, and we save access files as MP3s. So just throwing that out there is a standard that I use, but I don't know that that's, the be all end all of like the file type that you should be using.
It's also a matter of software that will render the file and the operating system. I have a few files that will only open on Apple-based systems. And then I have others that will only open on Windows. It's a matter of how the drive itself is formatted. If something was created in an old software system, I have to find a way to open it. I know that there are websites online where they do archive the older software so that I can open these old files. So I don't think that it's really a matter of if there's one unifying file type that we want for certain archival files. It's more ones that we know will, file types that are going to last with whatever software is out there to render them.
And I think Tara threw in the chat that the National Archives probably has some standards for these things. So that could be another resource for folks that are interested in doing more research about file types. And I agree. I mean, it's so tricky with software. I remember the digital archivist at Hopkins had like, I don't know, at least 5 or 6 different fancy readers for devices from the past and all the different sizes of floppies, and so those are a digital archivist's best friend, I think. So just putting our 5-minute warning out there now. We have 5 more minutes to discuss, and then we'll go for another 5-minute break. Does anyone have any other thoughts or questions? I mean, I think this is also an area where we can just ask questions without answers. Should play some Jeopardy music. All right, well, I am not opposed to ending the session early if that's where we are. And as a co-presenter, I'm eternally grateful for Amanda for taking notes for the session. So if you do have thoughts or anything you want to add to the session, that Google Doc is available for you all. So if you want to throw some things in there, feel free to do that. And I'll pass it over to Johns now.
Great. And we'll, as a follow-up, we will be sharing that with everybody probably Monday or Tuesday. So give us an afternoon, but we'll get all this collected and back to you. So we get a luxury of not 5 minutes, but 9 minutes for a break. I don't know if Molly can do the 9-minute doomsday clock here, but keep us tuned in, and then we'll be back. The next session is, let me make sure I get the name right, Confederate Memorials and Columbus Monuments, What's to be Done. That was another vote getter from all of us, and Rob Scherberlein is going to walk us through that. I know Rob has done research and a lot of research and a lot of thinking on that, so that should be a good one as well. So we will see. Oh, if you have lightning talks, if you have not registered for lightning talk yet, check the chat feed. I'm not sure that's the right term, but if you scroll back, you'll see it. And if you're new to Bmore Historic, you hopefully have gotten the vibe that this is a super casual meeting of friends. So please don't be intimidated. Share what you're doing, what you're thinking, and would all love to learn a little bit from you. So we will see you in 9 minutes.
For lightning talks, there's 5 slots left, FYI.
5. I was going to threaten that I was going to take all the remaining time from the slots, and that would certainly prompt people to fill them up, but good. So 5 more people, come on in. We'll see you in 9 minutes.